Non-human entities, beings that we don't even recognize. From weird see-through black creatures, to aliens, to freaking Godzilla. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 3 true scary stories of these strange things. Small, ugly, see-through creature. Hi, I'm a 20-year-old male from Australia. Grew up in a Muslim family, but stopped believing religion when I had feelings for the same sex. I don't usually hear about ghosts. Never even had interested of hearing about it until today. The reason I am writing this right now is because this morning, something happened that I cannot explain. It was about 10 a.m. in the morning and I was still asleep. My mom came into my room and tried to wake me up. I didn't respond to her, so she touched me to see if I had a fever. Wanted to know why I was still asleep. After she touched me, she left the room, and seconds after I felt a presence of something else, and weird noises. I knew it wasn't my mom or my brother, but for some reason I wanted to believe it was them, so I told them to exit, but something still walked towards me and touched me on my feet. It was the weirdest and most uncomfortable feeling, and was a mix between electric and paralyzing touch. It freaked me out, but I couldn't get up to see what it was. I was trying to scream, but nothing came out. It was moving slowly towards my face, and I just managed to see it. It was a small black thing. I can't describe the looks, but it was ugly and see-through, whatever it was. It was nothing anyone I knew had ever seen before. It was as tall as a 6-year-old. And from what I remember, it was a bold thing. I kept trying to move around and scream, but I couldn't. And it made all these weird noises. I can't describe how, but sounded more like that noise when you turn on the hot tap. Not exactly, but it was similar enough. And I can't turn on the hot water tap without getting shivers. I don't know how it ended, but I managed to scream. I still wasn't as able to scream as loud as I wanted, but I yelled enough to bring my family to my bedroom. After talking to them for hours, I went to have a shower. I turned on the hot water and a similar noise was there. I was freaked out and turned off the water, and the same noise was still there. I screamed and ran outside. That was proof to me that it wasn't a dream. I am now freaked out going to sleep in case I see it again. I cannot believe what I saw, and I don't know what to do. If anyone has experienced it, I would love to talk to you about it. The Godzilla Monster Thing Night. The Godzilla Monster Thing. I was between 6 or 7 years old. At one season, my older brother went to the US, and I never imagined such a surprise. I only remember that I was a huge Godzilla fan. So one day, my brother returned from the United States. He brought me a Godzilla doll. It was as big as 2 feet tall and heavy. It had a large tail and was black in color, with a bright orange patch on its back. So I just fell in love with it instantly, and I was filled with such happiness. But my mother wasn't in the same emotional state. I always watched with my nanny those classic Godzilla black and white films on the TV every night before going to bed, and I always kept Godzilla with me to every place I was going. If I was going to the living room, I took him with me. If I was going to the bathroom, Godzilla was there with me too. If I was taking a nap, then Godzilla was there again, with my face on its chest and my fingers in its hand, because I imagined that he was my friend and was being kind to me. Thinking, as a child I remember its smell very well. My mom and nanny were very worried about my behavior towards the doll and disliked it, and to worsen things, they are religious, so they thought Godzilla was an evil, satanic thing, and they were annoyed about my behavior as well. One day, they took Godzilla from me, maybe while I was at school. Godzilla wasn't in any place, and I was desperately looking for it. I was begging them to give it back to me, but they didn't. So I went into a depression and cried for Godzilla each night because I couldn't sleep alone without him. Until one of those nights, I remember I was laying down on my bed and my room was full of darkness. I was only awake looking at the wall when I had a sensation that there was something strange with the wall, and suddenly a white colored light began to appear. It began to get bigger and bigger each time, a stronger and bright light. It was wide enough as a halo or hole. Then I could see a black huge mass emerging from it in a little fast motion pace. As it had almost emerged from the light hole, I could see that it was covered in scales, in its polygon shape as Godzilla's, and the scales were smaller in the chest and in the belly. But to my surprise, it didn't have arms or legs and was headless without a neck as well. Only the floating trunk in the air, and he was huge, powerful, and muscular, with pectorals and prominent belly but firm. I was shocked and stiff and unable to move. That thing in a fast motion fled over to me and was squeezing me literally. I could remember its scaly chest almost on my face, but all of his weight on me, and I could feel nasty, horrible tickles in my ribs as if someone were sticking its fingers between my ribs and I couldn't get rid of it. It was impossible to get away from him. It only lasted for a while, but I felt as if it was an eternity. Suddenly, it got away from me, flying in a retreat motion, going back to the light hole where it emerged, making an exhaling air, sounded like a motor engine, until it disappeared in the light, and the light got smaller and smaller, until it completely disappeared. I remember it as if it happened a month ago, and now I'm 27 years old. Thanks for reading this, and this is real. I swear on it. The strange object in the woods. I'm sure you will agree that encountering a ghost ranks right up there on the Richter scale of scary as one of the most bizarre metaphysical stories we might come to share, huddled around our campfires on a chilly night. With your permission, I have another story to tell, arguably not the same as a ghost, but just as unusual nevertheless. I was 14 when what should have been an unforgettable, life-changing event happened to me. More precisely, this happened to both me and my stepfather way back in the early 1960s while we stomped around deep in the woods one misty October morning. Over the years that followed, neither of us ever spoke regarding it. Not one word did we share, unaware it ever even happened. And it's too late now. You see, my memory of the event returned only after my stepfather, and God rest his soul, passed away from a well-aimed self-inflicted gunshot to his head. Not saying when his memory returned or if it ever did, but I do wonder about him pulling that trigger. He might have remembered. As I was saying, those woods, it should be understood the woods were generally an ignored expanse lurking at the outskirts of town, where decades of undisturbed grasses and twisted trees coexisted with the rusted wire boundaries of the near-defunct Oiland factory, a struggling southern Illinois ammunition plant, and home to those nationally distributed, you may have seen one, red roadside emergency flares. The woods, simply put, were a no-man's land, isolated and devoid of life, save it for the occasional darting rabbit or croaking frog, or maybe the late afternoon's harrowing screech of one lonesome katydid calling from any of 1,000 shadowed entanglements along the gentle creek that meandered quietly, almost snake-like, inside the place of isolation. I loved it there. It was on this one afternoon, my trusty .22 rifle in hand, while traversing along the banks of this wooded creek, that I spied what I thought to be a child's wagon, sitting further back from the water's edge. Upon closer examination, Its size was about right, but this metallic-looking, two-tone thing, a light gray on top and a light blue on the bottom, was of a different shape. There were two tubes extending its length, one on each side, with a flat, boxed-in area on top between the tubes. A sort of truck bed, I thought. But more so, this thing might make a sporty raft, and the flat area a perfect place for standing with a pole in hand. Put this in some pond water, yeah, the fun from it sure seemed promising. And from matter, it might just as well make a nice spaceship, came to mind. Confused over such thoughts, I stood, looking in wonderment. But for those tubes, and no place for wheels, and that streamlined metallic look, well, I just didn't know what the heck it was. Whatever it was certainly off the beaten trail, and it surely hadn't floated here, for it was too far from the water to be connected, and it made no sense for someone to drag it here just to abandon it. That's when I thought of my stepdad. I would ask for help, and I wouldn't be alone. We'd return the following day. He would later agree and determine whether it was worth dragging home. The morning came and we headed out. Again, me totting my .22. I always took my rifle when walking those woods, for target practice mostly, but also the comfort it gave me, having protection against the unknown. Wished I'd left it home that day. With some initial difficulty, I located the object, hidden in among the camouflage. We had walked right past it. It's sure gonna make a great raft, I found myself thinking out loud, but taking a closer look, noted to my dismay a large crack across the flat area. How could I have missed something like that? I'm not sure who spoke first, but the conclusion that this thing was worthless, impossible to repair. As we turned to leave, movement caught my eye. I stopped, aware my stepdad had also stopped. But when I went to speak or turn in his direction, I couldn't do either. I was restrained, literally frozen from head to toe, but frozen didn't keep me from seeing the two approaching creatures. In no time, two huge and bulky 7 or 8 foot humanoid reptilians stood towering over us. I couldn't do a damn thing other than stand fixated, silently screaming, extremely horrified. How odd it was that our reptilian confronters were wearing uniforms, an odd thought to have at itself. A form-fitting cut from what looked like to be brown canvas, complete with boots, gloves, and matching skull cap. Surprising me equally, if not more so, was the one speaking. I was hearing English, but hearing the words in my mind only. The one speaking was loud and angry, and addressing me, menacingly drawing nearer, asking if I had any intentions of shooting him. Pointing towards my rifle, he repeated his question just as loud and just as angry, but more near, and all the more threatening. It was at this time that his companion, and thank God for him, stepped forward, and in a much calmer voice said, "Stop. This is a child. He is of no threat to us." Unable to move, still screaming inside, my eyes strained for Dad. I could see him standing there, the tears running down his cheek. The much calmer reptilian seemed to be in charge, and for that I will be eternally grateful, for he communicated on a friendlier, reassuring basis. We learned that yes, the metallic object was a spaceship, and that these two beings were explorers on a mission the nature they did not share. Our fears were quieted as the calmer one continued, saying that they would not harm us, saying they intended to release us, saying we would soon forget our encounter. Words and concepts that came ever so pleasing to my mind's ear. With passage of time and nerves settling all around, I alone was permitted a limited exchange of thought, much as one would do verbally, but using mind only. The angrier reptilian having placed himself in front of my dad. When I questioned how it is too large, whatever they were could fit inside such a small space as that toy-sized wagon, a chuckle was heard, It was explained they possessed technology, allowing them to shrink their ship. The smaller size given an advantage in avoidance. It was by sheer chance that we had stumbled upon it. Any damage to their ship was a mind trick, that they were aware of me the day prior, that they had chosen not to confront me then, but became curious when more of our kind returned. What they actually were is still a conundrum. There is little more to say. I do have vague memory of Dad and me walking, and the trees and such moving steadily past. Dazed, neither of us speaking, just headed for home, and very relieved to be doing so.